Story 1. I've had my share of sleepovers growing up, but there's one that still haunts me, almost 15 years later. It happened when I was 14, at my friend Ellie's house. Ellie's family had this beautiful Victorian home, 3 stories tall with a wraparound porch, the kind of place that feels both impressive and slightly intimidating. I'd been there many times before, but always during daylight hours, and always with other friends around. This was the first time I'd stayed overnight, and the first time Ellie and I would be alone, her parents away for their anniversary weekend. They trusted Ellie. She was responsible, quiet, the type of teenager who preferred reading to partying. They had only agreed to let me stay over because they knew me well, and because her older brother would be coming home late that night from his college dorm to check on us. The evening started normally enough. We made pizza, watched some horror movies that we probably shouldn't have, and talked about school and boys and all the things 14-year-old girls discuss. But as midnight approached, Ellie started acting different. She became quieter, her responses delayed, her gaze occasionally fixing on something I couldn't see. I asked if she was tired, if she wanted to go to sleep, but she just shook her head and smiled, though the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I don't sleep well here anymore," she said finally, her voice so soft I had to lean in to hear her. "What do you mean?" I asked, setting down my soda can. "You've lived here your whole life." Ellie nodded slowly. "Things changed after they renovated the basement." I knew about the renovation. Her parents had converted their unfinished basement into a home office and storage area about 6 months earlier. I remembered Ellie mentioning something about the contractors finding old newspapers from the 1920s in the walls, and an unusual collection of small animal bones beneath the original flooring. "Changed how?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, though the atmosphere in the room had shifted, become heavier somehow. "I sleepwalk now," she said simply, as if this explained everything. I waited for her to continue, and after a long pause, she did. "My parents found me at the basement door 3 times last month, just standing there, trying to open it." "That's a little weird," I admitted. "But sleepwalking isn't that uncommon." "The door was locked from the inside," Ellie interrupted, her eyes finally meeting mine. "With a deadbolt. A deadbolt that requires a key that only my parents have. And I was trying to go down, not up." A chill ran down my spine despite the warmth of the house. Outside, I could hear the wind picking up, rustling through the trees that surrounded Ellie's home. "Maybe you were just confused, while sleepwalking," I suggested, though my voice lacked conviction. Ellie shrugged, then stood up abruptly. "Let's go to bed. I'm getting tired." We went through the usual bedtime routine, brushing teeth, changing into pajamas, setting up the air mattress on Ellie's bedroom floor where I would sleep. Her room was on the 2nd floor, directly above the newly renovated basement. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up, not sure at first what had disturbed my sleep. The house was silent, except for the soft creaking that old houses make as they settle. I rolled over, peering up at Ellie's bed in the dim glow of her nightlight. It was empty. I sat up, thinking maybe she had gone to the bathroom, but the hallway light wasn't on. I called her name softly, no response. With a sigh, I got out of the air mattress, figuring I should check on her, remembering what she had said about sleepwalking. The house was dark as I made my way downstairs, carefully navigating each step to avoid making noise. I checked the kitchen first, then the living room, finding no sign of Ellie. A sense of unease began to grow in my stomach as I realized where she must be. The basement door was at the end of the main hallway, a heavy wooden door with ornate paneling that didn't match the rest of the house. It was original to the building, one of the few features her parents had decided to keep during their various renovations. As I approached, I could see a figure standing in front of it, motionless. Ellie's white nightgown almost glowing in the darkness of the hallway. "Ellie?" I whispered, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet house. She didn't respond, didn't move, just stood facing the door, her hand resting on the knob. I moved closer, stepping carefully, unsure if I should wake her. I'd heard somewhere that it could be dangerous to wake sleepwalkers, though I wasn't sure if that was true or just an old wives' tale. When I was about 5 feet away, I could see that her eyes were open, but vacant, staring at the door as if she could see through it to whatever lay beyond. "Ellie, let's go back to bed," I said gently, reaching out to touch her shoulder. The moment my fingers made contact, she spoke, but her voice wasn't her own. It was deeper, hollow somehow, as if coming from the bottom of a well. "They're waiting for me," she said, her hand tightening on the doorknob. A shiver ran through me, raising goosebumps along my arms. "Who's waiting?" "Ellie, you're sleepwalking." She turned to look at me then, but her eyes didn't focus on my face, instead seeming to look through me. "The ones below," she answered, in that same hollow voice. "They found something when they dug, something they shouldn't have disturbed." I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "There's nothing down there, Ellie, just your dad's office and some storage boxes." A smile spread across her face, a smile I had never seen before, too wide, too knowing. "That's what they want you to think," she whispered, and turned back to the door. She twisted the knob, pulled on the door, but it remained firmly shut, locked with the deadbolt her parents had installed. For several long moments, she stood there, pulling harder, her knuckles white with effort. Then she stopped, her body going completely still. I heard it then, what she must have been hearing all along. Scratching, coming from the other side of the door. Soft at first, then more insistent, as if something with long nails was dragging them across the wooden surface, up and down, searching for a way through. "They want me to let them out," Ellie said, her voice suddenly sounding like her own again, small and frightened, no longer hollow. "Every night, they call me down here, they want me to open the door." The scratching grew louder, more frantic, and I could swear I heard whispering underneath it, multiple voices speaking too softly to make out the words, but with an urgency that made my heart race. "We need to go back upstairs," I said firmly, fear giving my voice a strength I didn't feel, as I took Ellie's arm and began pulling her away from the door. To my surprise, she came willingly, her body relaxing as she moved away from the basement. Within a few steps, her eyes closed, and she truly began sleepwalking, allowing me to guide her back up the stairs into her bedroom. Once she was back in bed, I sat on the air mattress, wide awake, listening. The scratching had stopped when we left the hallway, or perhaps it had never been there at all, just my imagination fueled by Ellie's strange behavior and the stories she had told me earlier. I didn't sleep again that night, just sat there watching Ellie, who slept peacefully for the remaining hours until dawn. When morning came, I asked her if she remembered getting up during the night, going to the basement door. She shook her head, looking confused. "I slept really well actually, first time in months," she said, smiling brightly as she pulled her hair into a ponytail. I didn't mention what had happened, what I had heard. I told myself it was nothing, house noises, an overactive imagination, the result of watching too many horror movies before bed. A week later, Ellie's family moved out of that house, rather suddenly. When I asked her why, she would only say that her father had found something in the basement that concerned him. something behind one of the walls they hadn't opened during the renovation. She never told me what it was, and I never asked. Some questions are better left unanswered.
Story 2.
I had been looking forward to my 16th birthday sleepover for weeks. My parents had finally agreed to let me invite 5 of my closest friends to stay the night in our century-old farmhouse. A rare treat since we had only moved in 3 months prior. The house was beautiful during daylight hours, with its high ceilings, creaking wooden floors, and ornate fixtures that spoke of another time. But as night fell, the character that felt so charming in sunlight took on a more ominous quality in the shadows. We had spent the evening as teenagers do, sharing stories, watching movies, eating far too much pizza and cake. It wasn't until close to midnight, when the conversation inevitably turned to the age of the house, that Madison pulled a Ouija board from her backpack. "I thought it might be fun," she said with a casual shrug, though her eyes glinted with excitement in the dim light of my bedroom. "Old house, birthday night, it's perfect." I hesitated. My mother had specifically mentioned when we moved in that there were rumors about the previous owners experiencing unusual things. Nothing specific, just the kind of vague warnings that came with any house that had stood for over 100 years. "I don't know," I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the gentle patter of rain that had begun to fall outside. "My mom mentioned something about..." "It's just a game," Jennifer interrupted, already helping Madison clear a space on the floor. "Besides, it's your birthday. Don't you want to make it memorable?" I relented, as the rain grew stronger against the windows, casting intricate shadows across the walls of my bedroom. We gathered in a circle on the floor, our fingertips lightly touching the planchette as Madison began to guide us through the ritual. "Is anyone here with us tonight?" Madison asked, her voice taking on a theatrical quality that made some of the girls giggle nervously. For several long moments, nothing happened. The only sound was the rhythmic drumming of raindrops against the windowpane, and the occasional creak of the old house settling. "Maybe the spirits are shy," Amber joked, though her smile seemed forced in the flickering candlelight we had arranged around the board. We were about to give up, when the planchette suddenly moved, gliding smoothly across the board to hover over. "Yes." A collective gasp rose from our circle, followed immediately by accusatory glances. "Who pushed it?" I demanded, though my voice trembled slightly. Each of my friends shook their head, denied any involvement, their eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "What's your name?" Madison continued, her voice now lacking the theatrical quality, replaced by something more cautious. The planchette remained still for so long that I began to relax, convinced that someone had indeed been pushing it. But then, slowly, deliberately, it began to move again. "Visitor?" "Visitor?" Rebecca whispered, as if afraid to give the word too much power. "That's vague. Are you a friendly visitor?" Jennifer asked, her earlier enthusiasm noticeably dimmed. The planchette remained motionless for several heartbeats, then slowly moved to "No." A chill seemed to settle over the room, despite the warmth of 6 bodies huddled close together. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof in a steady rhythm that seemed to match my growing anxiety. "I think we should stop," I said quietly, but Madison shook her head. "We can't just stop in the middle. We need to say goodbye properly or..." She trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence as we all knew the superstition. "Why are you here?" Madison asked, her voice stronger now, determined. The planchette moved quickly this time, circling the board once before spelling "Benhere." "Been here?" You mean in this house? I asked, my birthday celebration now entirely forgotten as goosebumps raised along my arms. The planchette moved to, yes. How long have you been here? Jennifer asked, her voice barely above a whisper. ALWAYS. We exchanged nervous glances, the excitement of the seance now completely replaced by unease. I was about to insist we end the session when a sound caught our attention. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, in the hallway outside my bedroom door. Is that your parents? Amber whispered to me, and I shook my head. They're out for dinner, won't be back until after 1. The footsteps continued, moving past my door, then stopping. For several seconds, there was only silence and the sound of rain. Then the footsteps began again, now moving back toward the door. Hello? I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet room. No response came, but the footsteps stopped directly outside my door. We stared at the door handle, watching in horrified fascination as it slowly began to turn, then stopped, as if whoever, or whatever, was on the other side had changed their mind. The footsteps resumed, moving away down the hall, toward the stairs. Madison was the first to break the silence. We need to end this now. With shaking hands, we placed our fingers back on the planchette, and Madison spoke firmly. Goodbye. The planchette moved to goodbye on the board, but as we removed our fingers, a final sound echoed through the house. The front door, opening, then closing with a decisive click. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling as I called my parents. They answered on the second ring, confirming they were still at the restaurant, that no one should be in the house besides us. The remainder of the night passed in uneasy vigilance, all of us huddled together in my room, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house, as the rain continued its steady rhythm outside. We told ourselves it was our imagination, that old houses made strange noises, that someone must have pushed the planchette as a joke. But in the morning, as my friends gathered their things to leave, Jennifer noticed something that none of us could explain. On the wooden floor in the hallway, leading from my door to the stairs, and then to the front entrance, were wet footprints, far too large to belong to any of us, that hadn't been there the evening before. Footprints that seemed to have appeared during the night, as if someone had walked in from the rain, through the locked front door, and up to my bedroom, before departing the same way. My family moved out of the house 3 weeks later, though we never told our real estate agent exactly why. To this day, whenever it rains at night, I find myself listening, wondering if, somewhere, those same footsteps are walking through someone else's home, someone who doesn't yet know about the visitor.
Story 3.
I've never really liked sleepovers. Even as a kid, I was always the one who wanted to go home by midnight. Something about trying to fall asleep in someone else's house. The strange smells, the creaky floors, the way shadows stretched differently on unfamiliar walls. It always left me feeling unsettled. This happened when I was 12. Back then, I lived in a quiet town in northern Michigan. A place where summer nights were long and cool, and everything smelled like pine and wet earth. My best friend, Kelsey, had invited me and 2 others to stay the night at her house. Her parents were going away for the weekend, but her older sister, Jenna, was going to be there. Jenna was 16, quiet, kind of distant, but not in a mean way, just observant. She always watched more than she spoke. The evening was normal enough. We made microwave popcorn, watched an old horror movie that wasn't even scary, and then piled into sleeping bags in the living room. The fireplace had this weird iron grate on it that made strange shadows when the lamp was on. But it didn't really bother us at first. We told jokes, whispered gossip. And somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning, we all started drifting off. I woke up to silence. Not the comforting kind of silence you hear when everyone is asleep. This silence was thick. Still. Too still. Even the old grandfather clock in the hallway had stopped ticking. The first thing I noticed was how cold it was. The kind of cold that made the tip of your nose ache. And the second thing was that someone was standing in the corner. At first, I thought it was Jenna. She was tall, slender, had long dark hair. But something was wrong. Whoever was standing there, they weren't quite facing us. Their head was tilted, like they were listening. Not to us, but to something deeper. I tried to say something. A whisper, a name, anything. But the air felt too heavy to push sound through. I blinked. The figure didn't move. I looked around. Everyone else was asleep. Even Jenna, who I now saw was curled up on the recliner across the room. So whoever was standing in the corner wasn't her. The figure remained motionless. Not breathing, not shifting. Just watching. Or rather, being watched, maybe by something I couldn't see. I pulled my sleeping bag up over my nose and closed my eyes. That's what we do when we're scared, isn't it? We pretend not to see. We pretend not to feel. And maybe, just maybe, whatever it is, won't see us back. When I opened my eyes again, it was light outside. The room looked the same furniture, same shadows. But the corner was empty. I never told anyone what I saw. Maybe because I didn't want to be the one who ruined sleepovers forever. Maybe because I wasn't even sure if it had been real. But the next time I stayed at Kelsey's, I noticed something strange. That corner? It had a chair in it. A big wooden rocker. And sitting on it was an old, folded quilt. Kelsey told me it had belonged to her grandmother, who used to sit there at night, staring into the fire, long after everyone else had gone to bed. Apparently, her grandmother believed there were things in the quiet that only the fire could keep away. I still don't go to sleepovers. Not because I'm afraid of being alone in the dark, but because I'm afraid of not being alone.